Good afternoon, Dwayne here, Dry Creek Wrangler School. Hadn't posted anything in a while. Been pretty busy and hadn't been feeling just real good last 2 or 3 weeks, and so I kind of had to prioritize some things, but today doing all right, and I've got something kind of on my mind I want to talk to a little bit. It's been requested, so we're going to go through this and see how we do. It's been really hot here last several days. I'm in the tack room. It's cooler than it is out there, but not by much. And I just had to turn the fan off because it was whirring bad on the camera. So we'll do this until I'm done or until I start melting down. And when I get too much tallow has melted off of me, I'll probably just stop and do something else. But it's known, people who follow the channel, people who know me, know that I'm a Christian, and but they also know that I have Marcus Aurelius meditations. A lot of the advice and counsel I give goes back to a lot of the thoughts on Stoicism, and there are a lot of the beliefs and not systems, but ways of looking at the world of Stoicism that I hold. And but I am very much a Christian. So I've had people ask me, Dwayne, what is the difference between Christianity and Stoicism? Or what are the similarities? Or how do you justify being both? So I'm going to give a very simple answer, and it's not going to be in-depth and complex because I'm not an in-depth, complex guy. But let's just see if we can't address this a little bit. By the way, before I forget, I've got a Placencia Alma Fuerte. A fella came to the school, I guess 3 or 4 weeks ago, brought me a box as a gift. They're the first ones I'd ever had of these, and I like them. They're right in my wheelhouse. They're not for beginners. They're pretty rich and pretty strong, but they excellent. I don't know if I've ever had anything by Placencia before these. I don't remember. But the construction is excellent. The draw has been consistent, excellent across, and the flavor's really good. And so anyhow, I have in my library, I have a book called a Jefferson Bible. And I approach meditations like the Jefferson Bible. Now you say, Dwayne, what in the world is a Jefferson Bible? Thomas Jefferson took the Gospels in the New Testament and went through and removed any reference to the divinity of Christ, to the supernatural, any miracles, anything, and he boiled it down to just what he found palatable. The good words of a good man, Jesus Christ. And then he put it out, and I've got a copy of it. Wisdom, in my view, all right, you asked my view and my approach. This is just what it is, okay? All wisdom comes from God. And if we actually go back and study the Old Testament, before all of the scripture was written, before everything, we find God had prophets. God had men in different parts of the world that were not Jews. They were not part of the patriarchs, but they were there. And all wisdom comes from God, and God gives wisdom out to mankind as mankind needs it. And there is no wisdom outside of God, okay? Now, most of the thoughts, many of the thoughts, and the viewpoints that Marcus Aurelius puts down, as was taught to him, of the Stoics, is much older than the Stoics. We need to understand that the Greek philosophers that put these viewpoints down didn't come up with them on their own. They weren't the first ones to make them up. Okay, if you sit down with a copy of Meditations and the book of Proverbs in the Bible, and start reading them side by side, you will find that much of what is in Meditations was written thousands of years before, in the book of Proverbs and in the book of Ecclesiastes. So, well, Dwayne, why read the one as opposed to the other? The book of Proverbs was written by Solomon. Solomon was an Israelite king. He was the son of King David, all right? And he became the king, became very wise. But what we need to never lose sight of, especially when we're reading Psalms, Proverbs, Ecclesiastes, Song of Solomon, those books are actually, as a whole, they're called poetry books. Now, this has nothing to do with their viability or anything like that. I'm not talking about that at all. But even today, Israel and that whole area of the globe is called what? It's called the Near East. Okay? And the people are Semitic. All right? They're Semitic people, and their language and their traditions and everything are, I've been told that this word has fallen out of favor today. And so if it has, please don't be offended. I don't mean anything bad by it. Okay. But they're a lot closer to being Oriental in thought and Oriental in expression than they are in being Western. Okay. They are, Solomon's expression would be, just his method of expression would be closer to Confucius or Sun Tzu than it would Milton or Byron or, whoever. And I'm just talking about because of the Asiatic, Oriental culture and way of saying things. So what I like about the Greek Stoicism, and yeah, I know Marcus Aurelius was Roman, but much of the Roman culture side of things came from the Greeks. All right. And they have a Western way of thinking. And more importantly, they have a Western way of expressing what they're thinking. So you can take the same truth as expressed by Solomon, or you can take that truth as expressed by Marcus Aurelius. And for someone who's just starting to get into this, Marcus Aurelius speaks that truth in a manner that the Western mind will quicker relate to. You say, yeah, but it's not God. Well, it's not God. And I go through Marcus Aurelius like everything else. I discard that which I don't agree with, because they do throw out, they don't talk about God. They don't talk about the deity. And so that part, of course, is just like Jefferson's Bible. I discard it. I go through and I look for the good stuff. The stuff that, so I feel like I'm stumbling all over myself here. Okay, let's take horsemanship. All right. There are a lot of horsemen out there, horse trainers and horsemen, that teach the same thing. They teach the same concept. They teach the same philosophy. But you can watch one and say, that just doesn't quite click. It's not that I disagree with it. It's just not quite clicking with me. And you can watch another one and who has a different approach to it, just maybe his cadence and his speaking and his accent and his approach and the way he looks at things. And maybe he's a little more academic and whatever. And you can say, oh, I get it. It makes sense. He's saying the same thing he's saying. He's just saying it in a way that I can understand. Now, I'm not talking about, I'm going to get crucified for this, okay? I'm not talking about the Bible. I'm not talking about doctrine. I'm not talking about any of that. Okay? I'm just talking about simple wisdom of being a wise man on the earth, and there is no wisdom outside of God. And God put the wisdom down, but another people in another place, although they did not recognize and did not believe in God, they did recognize the wisdom of daily life of a man that comes from God, and put it down and wrote it down in a way that they could wrap their head around. And sometimes today, the wisdom of a man being a good man, approaching life in a wise way, it's written right there in Proverbs and in Ecclesiastes and in other places in Scripture. But sometimes it doesn't hurt to read it when it has been reformatted to fit a different mind, a different approach, a different look. That's why we'll go back to Sun Tzu. I've read Sun Tzu, I don't know, 3 times. That's why we read it and it just doesn't make sense. We read it again and it's like, oh, maybe there I can get that. And we read it again. And we can read it 6 or 8 times. And then we go spend some time in China and meet a Chinese professor, philosopher, whoever. And we start talking about it. He looks at us and says, that's not even close to what that means. Because it's being expressed from the viewpoint and from the thought process of an Oriental mind, which we don't have. So it's harder for us to get it. That's why I don't have a problem with Christians reading Stoicism. All right? If they go through it and they understand that the stuff in there that is against God, you just ignore it and throw it out. But a lot of it is just a reframing of the wisdom of God from a Western viewpoint and a Western way of looking at things. Okay? I hope that makes sense. And it's one of those things, if you're like a Christian and you're where you are as a Christian and you're not comfortable reading that, this is me putting my arm around your shoulder and saying, hey, brother, you got my 100% support. It's perfectly fine to not read that and just stick to Scripture. And it's great, okay? But if you're in today's society and you want to read it, you want to study it, and you want to see if some of these things are put down in a way that you can wrap your head around with your Western way of thinking, then I don't think there's anything wrong with that either. And that's what I do. All right, there's truth in there. And a man, Proverbs says a man, and I'll butcher this. This is not even remotely close to a quote. But a man who does not have control over his own spirit is like a city without a wall. That's just one of the things. It's like back in those days, all cities, however small, 1,500 people, 1,000 people, they had a wall built around them because it was lawless. The time was lawless. And bandit bands were huge, and so they all had protection. And a man who does not have self-control is like a city that has no protection, that has no wall around it. Okay? Well, you can go read in Marcus Aurelius, and that's what it talks about. A man with self-control. You cannot change what goes on around you in the world, but you can change how you react to it. Okay? All right, so there's a lot of that. So I don't think they're opposed to each other. I think there are things in that book that are not of God, that are not about God, that rejects the divinity. And so you're going to find that in anything you read just about. You're going to find things that are not exactly right. So just ignore it and go on. But I do think it is a very important, profitable book for Western civilization. Let's put it like that. That's just my view. I'm no authority on it, and it makes no difference to me if you have a different view about it or whatever. But you've asked me how I hold both of them. And so I'm just explaining to you that's how I hold both of them. Okay? All right? So a little something different today. But I hope it made you think a little bit. And we'll just catch you guys next time. And I still haven't broke out into a major sweat. It's not too hot. I'm going to go inside where the air conditioner is. All right? Y'all have a good day.